Man, I think the number one question in wrestling fans' minds, in my mind, ever since the U.S. Open when Final X got set, David Taylor versus Aaron Brooks, two guys in that Penn State room, in that Nittany Lion Wrestling Club room, is how did those roles go? How much did they train together? Did they train together? How long's it been since they trained together? Et cetera, et cetera. And for me, I've been thinking about this matchup for actually quite a long time. And it goes back to the Olympic Games in 2021 where I was lucky enough, I got to go. And at Tokyo, it was a really weird thing, an Olympics unlike any other, in that there were no fans, very limited media. It was just basically the athletes, the coaches, and a small number of members of the press. And so the way it worked at the Olympics is there was like a big hotel, and then basically across the street was the venue. So you're basically in those two places the entire time. So there's a lot of interaction with coaches and athletes and people that are, all associated with the games. And I'll never forget this conversation as you're just kind of hanging out in the lobby, chopping it up with a coach. And, if you don't know, they go, before the Olympic Games, they go to a camp, an acclimation camp in Japan at Nakatsugawa. So there's this camp going on, and they just got back from that, and they're getting ready to compete in Tokyo itself. And this coach is like, kind of giving us the rundown how things were going at camp, how wrestlers are looking. It's all looking good. And he's like, man, I tell you, this Brooks kid is a savage. Like, he's coming for sure. And so obviously I'm like, well, what do you mean? What's going on? So if you don't know, Aaron Brooks was brought by David Taylor as his training partner for the Olympic Games, right? And the reasons for that are sort of obvious. One, there's familiarity there. He knows Aaron's a good kid, hard worker, Penn State guy. But most importantly, Aaron Brooks can simulate the underhook series of Yazdani probably as well as anyone in America. If you watch him at the U.S. Open, if you watch him NCAAs, Aaron Brooks is sick with underhooks. If you watch Yazdani, who was guaranteed to be David Taylor's top competitor at the Olympic Games, that's his signature hold, his signature series, that underhook. So Brooks is brought to do that, and all reports were Aaron Brooks was giving David Taylor a really tough go. This is back in 2021, right? Aaron Brooks was not close to making the Olympic team at that point in time. He had lost to Zahid and Pat Downey, and it's not really on anyone's radar that this kid would be able to give David Taylor a competitive match. Now, there's caveat after caveat with this thing. One, David Taylor, for all we know, is making his descent down to weight, so he's not going to be feeling as good. Aaron Brooks can be as big as he wants to be. Two, it's frankly a no-stakes match. It's just a practice room match. And with that, you're maybe trying different things. So all that to say, yeah, it's a practice room match. So you can't make too much of it. But it meant enough to this coach that he volunteered it and said, man, it impressed this coach, who was not easily impressed, right? He said, man, Brooks is really, really good. He was giving it to David Taylor. It was some pretty awesome matches. So it's been kind of on my mind since then. And then what sort of makes it a little more interesting is 2021 Worlds. After David wins the Olympics, Aaron's not David's training partner for that. He's not David's training partner for the Worlds after that. So it would stand to reason at some point in time, now that could have been Aaron's choice to decline and say, hey, I'm focused on NCAA. I don't know the dynamics there. I don't know the reasons Aaron wasn't brought as a training partner. All I know is he wasn't brought. And so at some point they went from maybe a mentoring type of relationship to, okay, this is someone in my rear view. This is someone who I'm going to be maybe having to compete against to make world and Olympic teams. And now it has become that. And so now the question is, man, when's the last time they trained together? How do those training room goes go, right? And Aaron Brooks has looked phenomenal, obviously, but David Taylor is going to be a huge test for sure. Now there's also another, Penn State dynamic now with Kyle Dake being brought in and Jason Nolf as well. And that's a little different in that Kyle Dake's been at Cornell throughout his career. Now he's at Nittany Lion, and that looks like a really exciting matchup as well on paper. And, I think with the gains that Nolf has made at 74, a lot of people were giving him a really good chance. And as is often brought up, Jason Nolf was the only guy that was scored a takedown in that series at Final X. Now, you look at this on paper, it's like, man, it's got to be a little tense, right, in the Penn State room. You've got teammate versus teammate, but For me, I'm not sure if it is. And maybe it is. It has to be to a degree, right? It's like Jimmy Kennedy is Aaron's coach for sure, but he's also David's brother-in-law. Casey's been in David's corner for the Olympic finals, right? And world finals. He's been there every step of the way, but he's Aaron Brooks' guy. He's coached him throughout his career. And so it's a little challenging, but I don't make so much of that dynamic because for Kale and company, this has sort of always been the vision and always been the plan, and not just to have a guy contending for world team, but building that depth. And this is something they've dealt with, on the collegiate team. They've had some tense wrestle-off situations before, the Kassar-Rashid dynamic, 65 back some years prior. So this is nothing new for Penn State. They've been able to navigate that tension, but I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see more and more Penn State versus Penn State on the world and Olympic trial stages.